Hello there everyone, and I want to talk to you about the anxiety of returning to the workplace. So hey there everyone, coming to you live from my living room because my office is getting renovated. My office is only in the house, but for a lot of you, your office is going to be outside of the house and you've probably not been there for anywhere up to about 14, 16, even more weeks, depending on where you are in time watching this video. And I want to talk about that because you might find yourself anxious about returning to that office space or returning to being around people. And this is perfectly normal, but it is something that I would like to encourage you to think about and think about how you can get ahead of it. Because the way anxiety works is it works on our comfort zones. And before we went into lockdown, you may have been kind of teetering on the edge of that comfort zone. You know, you went into the office, it wasn't the most easy thing in the world for you to do, but you did it out of necessity, and that kind of kept you a little bit sharp there. Yes, it wasn't perfectly comfortable, but at the same time, it wasn't terrifying either. Now, the idea of going back there now might actually be terrifying. And because over this whole period we've had a proof of concept around the idea that many of us can work from home, whereas before we may have had no choice but to work in the office, it's going to become increasingly possible that people might reach out to their employers and ask to continue to work from home. Now, I want to advise against this for the following reason. Working from home and working from the office are two separate skills. They're both built on top of work and the principle of work, but they are two separate skills. And by working from home, we're not actually maintaining the skills that are involved in working face to face with people. And although it may be that it's way more comfortable for you to work at home, we don't always want to take the most comfortable option. I look at historically where things have arrived in terms of social anxiety, where you have people who, let's say, were on the cusp of not really being able to speak to people, but they would still have to speak to people in shops. They'd have to speak to people at the tills. They'd have to face people face to face. Then things like paying at the pump and self-service checkouts came along. And then those people basically obviously would gravitate towards that. Why wouldn't you gravitate towards that if you were uncomfortable with being face to face with people? But the thing is, whilst you were still doing it, you were still staying on top of that skill. And now going to the self-service till or the pay at the pump, you're not staying on top of that skill. So if you were to go to a petrol station that didn't have a pay at the pump, or you were to go to a supermarket and you had no choice but to go to a till with a person there, that's now way further outside your comfort zone than it was before. The same is very much true with work. If you avoid going to work for long periods of time, then the idea of actually going into the office is going to move outside your comfort zone. And this is important to stay on top of because there's gonna come things like office conferences or Christmas parties where you're gonna go from having spent 51 weeks of the year at home in the office, maybe, wearing your finest tracksuit bottoms from the waist down like I'm doing right now, to then having to kind of dress up, show up and be in front of people, which is a skill that you haven't practiced for all that time. So it only makes sense that being out of practice with that, you will feel more anxious. That's normal. So that's why I want to encourage people to actually continue to go to the office. And the thing is, employers are going to be on this as well because, if you say, I want to work from home, a lot of them will say, cool, I want to save some money on the office space. And they might be as on board with it as you are. And this is going to feel like the most obvious and best answer short term going in. But long term, it runs the risk of making it so that those physical face-to-face social interactions move so far outside your comfort zone that they become something that you can't do anymore. And that's not something that I want for you, and I imagine it's not something that you want for yourself. Now, that's not to say that you can't work from home more. But maybe instead of going with a hard off switch on this and saying, that's it, no more working from the office, maybe you speak to your employers and say, I work a lot better from home, but I also want to maintain the skill of this. So could we look at maybe a reduced time in the office? Now that way you keep your feet in both worlds and you keep both skills fresh. If you're an employer, just bear in mind that this might be something that your employees are going through and have a conversation with them. Sit down and talk them through this idea of maybe losing the ability to be in the office and see what they think about this. And that way, by improving the communication from both sides, we can work on something long term that is going to be in the best interests of all parties. As always, if you've enjoyed this, then hit that subscribe button below. And if you want to get involved in mental health conversations live with me, I go live on Twitch every Sunday night between 7 and 10 p.m. at twitch.tv/mindsetbydave. And I would love to have you as part of the conversation.